Hello, everyone. Welcome to an episode of The Copy Corner with your host, Terry Schilling.
And Dan Marzullo.
Yes, Dan, how are you doing today, buddy?
Doing good, Terry. How are you, man?
I'm doing well, man. And everybody listening and watching across the internet, The Copy Corner, welcome. This is our corner of the internet where Dan and I share copywriting tips, content writing tips, digital marketing tips to help you write clear, concise copy that helps grow your business. And I use that little twist to the intro here today, Dan, because that's what we're going to talk about today on the episode. As you can see in all the captions and like the title of the podcast, how to write clear and concise copy. And we find that a lot of copywriters, ourselves included, Dan, they struggle with this. We are so wordy. We need to be more concise without being repetitive. I've had people edit my copy and be like, there's a lot of redundancies here. We can limit this. It happens. I'm sure you get this too with a lot of your content articles.
Yeah, exactly, Terry. I think we got some good advice for the people today watching this one.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. And I'll let you start because there is really this, I'll just let you start. I won't go anymore.
Yeah, no, sounds good, Terry. I think for me, when I think of clear and concise copy, I think of it from two angles, right? First, from the writer's perspective, and then second, as an editor. So when you're writing and you're directly doing it, I think the biggest reason people get caught up and it's not clear and concise is because they're writing and they're trying to be super fancy with their words or too formal. So that just all this jumbled crap just comes out, right? Instead of just thinking, what am I trying to tell this reader and just saying it, right? So I think step one is, as a writer, stop trying to be too fancy and wordy with it and just write what you have to say. That's going to be super helpful. But number two, I think, the biggest component that comes into play is when you go back and you're editing and rereading, that's where you're going to make it clear and concise, because naturally you're probably going to have some filler words here and there, and it's, needs some cleaning up. So go through and redline some of those words and things that you can take out so that it reads, better without it, and clear and concise. So I think you got to really attack it as an editor and say, is this word necessary? Does this sound better without it? Okay, get rid of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, man. You nailed it, because that really is this foundation of writing clear and concise copy. Because before you hit post, or before you send it to a client, or, publish it across the internet for yourself, make sure that you edit it or hire an editor to help you with this. But there are some simple exercises that you can do. And that's what we're going to go through a little bit of these today. And I read this line here, Dan, and it's interesting to me. So long sentences are not necessarily wordy, nor are short sentences always concise, right? And this is great. A sentence, I'm reading this to the side if we're watching here. A sentence is wordy if it can be tightened without loss of meaning, right? So like, we go through the copy, there's a lot of redundancies, there's a lot of inflated phrases that we can get rid of. Maybe even filling it up with, adverbs and adjectives, right? Like if you could say like, I'm genuinely tired today, right? Or like, I'm extremely tired, fill it in with adjectives. You could just say, I'm exhausted, or I'm fatigued. Like, you look for those type of filler words, like the adverbs, especially like, oh, I'm really sorry, or like, I'm remorseful, or I'm sorry. You don't have to put in the really there all the time. Now gauge it how you're writing it. I mean, if you're writing a sales page and you want to use it, go ahead. But, a lot of times when you're writing like an about story, or like if you're writing an article, LinkedIn post, something like that, you can cut these things out, right? To help eliminate redundancies, a couple phrases, we use like cooperate together, close proximity, basic essentials, true fact is a big one too, right? We can just get rid of these things. And then we can also just say like, Dan is working on this paper at work. It's like, why are we saying he's working at this at work all the time? Just be mindful of those things. And I just really like the inflated phrases of cutting down words to one or two words when they're saying the same thing. So these phrases like, at all times, changing it to always. In the event that, you can change that to if, right? So it's like, Dan moves these files in the event that some information is missing. It's like, Dan, move these files if there's missing information. We can really shorten those things up. Until such time as, you can say until, due to the fact that, you can change just to because. Right? And like you said, Dan, it's really about the editing process of going back and finding these type of, filler phrases. And one thing that I always look for is these introductory like word groups at the start of sentences. Like, well, in my opinion, or it seems like, or it seems that. We can cut out those sentences and those phrases to start a sentence, and just, start it out there. So like in my opinion, Dan and I, or just start it with Dan and I, and then go on. I think it's just naturally, like, because like sometimes we get caught of writing too much like we talk. But again, it comes back to the editing process at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely, Terry. And kind of like you said too earlier when we were chatting a little bit before we started recording is, don't be afraid to put a period in there, split two sentences or one into two, do what you got to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I that's a huge one, because we write a lot of commas, like and which and that. We can remove a lot of those and break it up. And one tip that I like to stick with as much as I can is to keep sentences around 30 words. Like 20 to 30 words is a good sweet spot. And then also when you're just writing, and to make it easier to read, write 2 sentences and then press return or enter, whichever is on your MacBook or your Microsoft Surface Book. I think enter may be on Microsoft, but just break those up, and it keeps it concise and easier to read at the end of the day.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's all about readability, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up a good point too, just about like how with copywriting, we talked about a little of this before we went live, Dan. Just with copywriters, we don't have to use like all the time like these complete sentences or just like proper grammar all the time. Elaborate a little bit more there.
Yeah, Terry. No, good point. Yeah, I think, as copywriters, we always tend to break the grammar rules, right? Somebody who's super strict by the book editor would probably get frustrated with some of the stuff we say, right? But, like Neville Medora and some of the big greats, they're like, using complete sentences, like do what you got to do to get the point across. You don't need to necessarily have this beautiful, perfect sentence every time. Your goal, at least as a copywriter, right? This could be different for different disciplines of writing, but you're just trying to engage that reader and get them to do something, right? So however you do that in the most effective way, do it. Like if you need to have an incomplete sentence in there to make it as clear as possible, do it.
Yeah. Put in the M dash, break it up, cut out a period, make it 2 sentences, press return. You guys can do that. If it gets the goal across that you want them to take action, you can. But use some of these other exercises and tips of looking for redundancies, inflated phrases where you can trim down to 1 word or 2 words and have them mean the same thing. And look out for adverbs. Like, again, like the really, truly, genuinely, a lot of times we can just cut that out because it gets more clear and to the point, right? And a lot of times it helps, write a more active voice too, instead of passive voice as well.
No, that's true. Yeah, good point.
Yeah. One other thing, because there's one more, the verbs like is, are, and we. Sorry, I just thought of this, and I had some here. Search for those, like is, are, and we. A lot of times we can cut those out. So it's like Dan is, responsible for monitoring and balancing, the budget, right? For example, you can just say Dan monitors and balances the budget. So is responsible, look for those is and are and we's. And then you can just use, just make the verb, make it an active verb in that case, and you can trim down sentences there. That's the last one. We're approaching our 10-minute mark. But yeah, guys, those are some quick tips to write clear and concise copy. Really, the point is it really comes in play in the editing process, and these other exercises of what to look out for are going to help you in the long run.
Well said, Terry.
Yes. Dan, anything else before we go?
No, I think in an effort to keep this video clear and concise, I'm out. That's all I got.
We're out. All right, everybody. Yes, we're keeping this one clear and concise. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening to the Copy Corner across the internet. As always, love what you do, proceed with passion, and Dan and I will see you on the next